time, his dedication to this beautiful ministry. So bless his words and bless the ears and the hearts that hear it, that together we may walk with Jesus on the road to Calvary. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. St. Peter, St. Apostle, pray. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay, Johnny boy. So leave us.
Thank you very much, Father. Thank you all for coming. Our subject tonight is the Shroud of Turin, sometimes called the Holy Shroud. And we're going to go through the modern case.
Can you hear it? It's not working. It's working, but not as I told.
I'll try to lower it.
There you go.
Aha. Okay. So, let's try it again. Is that okay? Okay. Our subject tonight is the Shroud of Turin, which we also call the Holy Shroud. And we're going to build the case for authenticity. Okay. So we have to circle back and forth. Just advance it.
How's the sound? How's the sound?
Is the sound okay?
Just in case. Okay. Sorry.
So we'll start out by talking about what is the Shroud of Turin, as I said, which we call the Holy Shroud. And we'll break this into three parts. I think you skipped the slide, but that's okay. Just stay right there. We'll talk about what the shroud is, a little bit about its physical characteristics, where it is, what you see on the cloth. But we'll spend most of our time talking about the scientific and historical information which we now know today as a result of the work of a very serious team of scholars since 1978. And we go through what we call trace evidence, which is evidence on the shroud. You've all seen programs on crime scene investigations or whatever, where they go through forensic evidence. And we'll talk about what we now know that really points toward the authenticity of the cloth. And we'll wind up talking about the image, what creates the image on the shroud. And behind me you see two large, just a little bigger than life-size photos of the shroud. But you'll see them on the screen and we'll kind of go back and forth. So, can you go back? Okay, so the first thing I want to point out is the shroud is a very long cloth. I have someone who's supposed to help me there. The cloth is a 14 foot by 3 inches, a 3 foot by 7 cloth made of linen. And at first, the measurements of the shroud seem quite big, quite long. And this is just a piece of linen to give you an idea of the size of the cloth. But the important thing is that in the time of Jesus, the unit of measurement was the cubit. You've all probably heard of the cubit. And the cubit, at that time, the equivalent was 21.6 inches by our standards today. So if you take the shroud and you translate it into cubits, it becomes 2 cubits by 8 cubits, which is very consistent with the manner in which cloth was being cut at that period of time. And it's made of linen. It's actually a very fine linen. If you look up at the picture, it's a 3/1 herringbone weave. It was a very fine fabric of its day, and we would expect that because in the Gospel it said that it was Joseph of Arimathea who gave his burial cloth and his cave tomb for the burial of Jesus. And Matthew, for example, in the next sentence says, and Joseph was a wealthy man. I think he said that to explain why this was such a fine cloth of its period. If you saw the cloth today, it's kind of a straw yellow. We call it sepia, from 2,000 years of oxidation. From 2,000 years of oxidation. But most importantly, on this cloth frontal and the dorsal, or the front and back images of a man. I'm just going to call him a man right now because we're building the case for authenticity. And this man, when you look at the cloth, this is the photograph of the cloth. That's the cloth that you actually see it. But this man bears on him actual bloodstains, which we will talk about, and the markings of a classic Roman crucifixion, which we'll talk about. And the long parallel marks that you see them over here, these long marks, these are burn marks from a fire in 1532 that damaged parts of the cloth. It didn't really damage the image, but the cloth was folded in 48 sections. And the fire in this church in France seared the edges. So you open it up and see these long scorch marks, and then you see these triangular patches, you see them up here, these triangular patches, which were put on in 1532 by the poor Clarendons to repair the cloth. They've now been removed. Anyway, so this is basically what the cloth is. It's the frontal and dorsal images of a man that we're going to demonstrate is the historic Jesus of Nazareth. Right. I'm sorry, we have to do this communication back and forth. Now, at the time of Jesus, the custom was to bury people in cave tombs, not always, but, and the average cave tomb in Jerusalem was carved into the soft limestone hills outside the walls of Jerusalem. It would have a rolling stone, would have a small aperture, and the body would be carried in. There was a pit area for the family to stand. The cloth would be laid on the ledge. The body would be laid with the head toward the center, prepared for burial. And it was hasty burial because the Sabbath was setting in, they had to leave and come back on the Sunday morning, without realizing that Jesus was going to rise. But then the cloth was drawn over, so that whatever mechanism created the images, it left a frontal and a dorsal image. Okay? I'm going to talk about that throughout. Now, in the New Testament, and actually in all of Holy literature, we do not find any physical description of Jesus. We don't know how tall he was, how much he weighed, what color he was, nothing, zero. But modern pathology, we'll get into this more later, can tell you that the man of the cloth is about 5'10", 5'11", and weighs about 180 pounds. But they can't tell exactly. And the reason is that the body is not lying flat on the cloth. Actually, the head is bowed forward, about 70 degrees, and the knees are flexed, with the left foot tending to be over the right foot, and the body is in a state of rigor mortis. So, as our pathology friends will tell us, they believe that this was the position of the body on the cross, because rigor mortis set in very quickly. Some people have asked, well, does it really set in that quickly? But don't forget that Jesus was dying for 24 hours when the God was ascending, so that rigor mortis set in very quickly. Okay, so we see signs of rigor on the shroud. Right? Now, today the cloth is kept in the city of Turin, Italy, Torino to the Italians. It's a beautiful city, about 400 miles north of Rome, at the foot of the Italian Swiss Alps. Just a very beautiful city. And it's kept in the cathedral of John the Baptist, which you see in the center of the screen here. It's been there since 1578, according to a little bit of history. And that basilica, that cathedral, is surrounded by the palace of the kings of Spain. result of the tree that we're going to talk about, there's a lot more protection for the whole shroud. So, for example, it's kept in a wooden casing with a bulletproof glass, as bulletproof as you can get today. You know, it's not very, very good. It's kept in an inert argon, nitrogen, oxygen compound, which really prevents deterioration. And Turin is an industrial city where they make Fiat, so they really want to be sure that the atmosphere is no more damage to the cloth, and it's kept air conditioned. And it's not out for display very often. More so in recent times. It was on display in 2015, last year. It was on display in 2010 and 1998. But usually it's like every 30 years. But in the last few years, since Pope Benedict and Pope Francis so believe in it, they have put it on exhibit more and more. Okay. But they have to be careful in to protect it. So let's talk about, is the shroud the authentic burial of the historic Jesus? And we find what we call trace evidence. If you've ever watched a crime scene program, you know that today we can tell so much from so many things: hair, pollen, saliva, blood, many, many things. Okay? So we call it forensic, meaning that it could be presented in court of law. That's what we mean by forensic. Okay? So let's talk about what the evidence is to see. Now, the modern scientific study of the shroud began in 1898, and it was about 18 years ago. And it started with an amateur photographer by the name of Seconopia, who was allowed to take the very first photographs of the shroud for a wedding of one of the kings of Savoy. And he took his box camera with glass plates and he photographed the shroud. Now, if you saw the shroud with the naked eye, it looks as you see it on the left. It looks a little clunky, it's a little ghostly. And when he took his first photos, and he went into his darkroom, Secondo was shocked to see that the image that came out on his negative plate was a positive image. And that was baffling to everyone at the time. You know, it's funny, sometimes I talk in high schools and elementary schools, and they look at me like, what's a negative? I have no idea. So the teacher will call me so I have to explain what a negative is. But anyway, this caught the interest of the scientific world. And they began to realize that there was more to this cloth than a lot of people understood. Then in 1931, a much better set of photos was taken by a professional photographer, Giuseppe Henri. Today we call them the Henri photos, and they're very much used in the Shroud studies. And then, if you look at these two photos here, these were taken in 1978 by the team I'm about to talk about. But it showed such interesting imagery that it began to really raise the questions. What are we really looking at? Okay? So, in 1978, the Vatican allowed a team of scientists, and that's when I got involved. I really worked with them. I wasn't on the team, but I worked with them. And the team, which was called STIRT, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, consisted initially of 24 scientists. They were allowed to spend 5 days round the clock in shifts, non-destructive testing of the cloth, looking for evidence, looking for what we could really find on this cloth that might point to its historical nature. There were many more that played supporting roles, blood labs, and whatever. And the team was a non-denominational team. There were Catholics, there were Protestants, there were Jews, there was an agnostic, there were men represent many branches of science, especially physics, chemistry, hematology, blood studies, tolerance studies, etc. And they also use many types of photography, which we'll show you as we go through. Mainly high-power microscopes, infrared, ultraviolet, and a kind of photography that we call quad mosaic, which I'm going to show you at the end, which help to undo the carbon-14 test. Okay, so we'll talk about that at the end. And one of the first discoveries made on Shroud was made by a team, Roger and Marion Gilbert. They were what we call experts in reflectance spectroscopy. And all that really means is that we bounce light off the shroud. Some goes through, some stays. We bounce light. It reflects. It's taken up by mirrors and spectrums, and it creates a spectrum that tells us different chemistries about the shroud. So as they were, if you look here on this back image, I don't know if you can all see it, but the sole of the right foot is blood soaked. Okay? So up here you see it right here. Okay? And when they put their microscopes on this area of the shroud, they saw in the blood particles that looked like, well, they didn't know at first. They put their reflective spectroscopy on this one area. And then they brought in a physicist, just advance it. Okay, named Dr. Sam Calipari. He put his high-power microscopes on there, and he made a very startling announcement to the team. He said, "This is dirt." And they took samples of the dirt. Now that really startled everyone, because a lot of them that went over on the team thought it's medieval hoax, this is that. But when they found that it was dirt, it made them think. And they sent the dirt to the United States to 2 different labs. They both came back and they said, this is a very specific kind of dirt called travertine aragnon. And in the cave tombs in Jerusalem, we have travertine calcite and travertine aragnon. So the reason that was startling was that no one believed that medieval artists, for example, would place microscopic particles of dirt in the shroud from the cave tombs at a time when no one knew the microscope. Okay? So it didn't solve any problems yet, but it started to build a pattern. Okay? They also found on the back of the tomb, they also found on the back of the tomb calcified pollen. And the significance of that is that these tombs, as I mentioned earlier, are made of limestone from the hills of Jerusalem. Limestone is calcium carbonate, so that if you laid something on the ledge, it could pick up traces of calcium. Okay? So that was another intriguing thing. An interesting thing as far as the dirt is concerned, in the New Testament, it never says that Jesus fell on his way to Calvary. We know that from early Christian tradition. We have manifestations. But there's dirt on the left knee. They've since found dirt on the left knee and dirt on the tip of the nose, which could have been from the fall. We don't know for sure. There's nothing really confirms that. But it certainly is very probable. Okay? Now today, we can tell an awful lot from pollen. It's a science that developed in the 60s and 70s, and there are many, many species of pollen all over the world. In fact, there was a case here in Florida, a very interesting case, where a man from Florida left Florida, drove to Colorado, went to a resort, killed somebody, came back to Florida, and he had left his phone here. He never used his credit cards. He thought, they'll never figure this out. But somehow they realized that he knew this person and examined him before they finally gave up, as They found pollen on the tires of his car that matched pollen from this specific area of Colorado, and that linked him to the scene of the crime. But this is the kind of stuff they do today. Okay? So, they brought in a criminologist who was a pollen expert. He was one of the pioneers of criminology. His name was Dr. Max Fry. And Dr. Fry was allowed to take sticky tape samples of surface debris on the Shroud. He couldn't touch the image, he couldn't touch the blood, but he could touch the areas around the image. And when Dr. Fry went back to his laboratory in Zurich, he realized that there were 58 species of pollen that he found. We found more since, but that he found. And the interesting part about it is that when they laid this pollen out on the grid, they found that pollen matched 4 areas of the world where we know historically the Shroud has been. And that would be Jerusalem, of course, where the Shroud left around 40 AD. It went north to the city of Edessa, where it was for, it's in Turkey, it was there for some 900 years. It then went to Constantinople, which is modern Istanbul, and then to here. And then it went to Europe. And it was in Chambéry, France, Mirae, France, and then it went to Turkey. Well, they found pollen from these 4 different areas. And that really added tremendous credibility to the historical narrative of how the Shroud moved in those years. In fact, an interesting thing is that for 300 years, the Shroud was captured by the Muslims. In 1620, after Muhammad died, they moved north, went to Jerusalem, and to Turkey. And when they went into Turkey, they captured the city of Edessa and held the Shroud for 305 years exactly. And I won't say they revered it, but they treated it well because they believed that Jesus was the greatest of the prophets at that time. So then finally, in 944, the emperor, Christian emperor, sent an army across Turkey to recapture the Shroud. And rather than go to war, the Muslims released it back to the Christian army for silver prisoners. And then it goes back to Constantinople. It stays there for till 1204. Then you probably heard, the Knights Templar sack the city of Constantinople, take the Shroud, disappears for 150 years and winds up in France. And finally, in the year 1532, there's a major fire in the cathedral in Chambéry, France. The Shroud was saved. It was kept in a silver reliquary, which started to melt, also hot fire. And then it was brought to Turin. Brought to Turin by the family of Savoy. That's where it's been since then. Okay? An interesting thing is this is a painting from around 944, showing the very early history when the king in Edessa, King Ambrose, received the Shroud from the disciple Thaddeus. And it shows the folded Shroud. And it's just a very beautiful painting. Eusebius was an early church historian that relates to these facts. Then, a little bit later, in 944, there's another painting which shows the emperor receiving the Shroud, which is a long cloth. You see the face of Jesus. And it really traced the history. For a little while, the Shroud was called the Little Tower, the Mandela, the Little Tower, because just to manage the 14-foot cloth, which doubled in 4, and you only saw the face in a landscape portrait. And so, we didn't know whether 2 different floors was there a Mandelian and a Shroud, but this painting kind of saw it. Right here, in Greek, it says the Mandelian. So we knew that the long cloth and the folded cloth were the same thing. Okay? Now, when those 13 went to tourism. They had two basic objectives, although it expanded. The first one was this real blood, or was it an image? Was it a painting? Okay, that was the first question we had. A lot of people thought, oh, it's kind of a painting. And secondly, what constitutes the image? And you see the image on the cloth, which is really beautiful. You know, when you had the chance to stand before the shroud for almost 4 hours, and the closer you get to the shroud is here, the closer you get, you can't see the image. You have to step back about 6 feet, then you start to see the image. And that's because the cloth is darkening with age, so the contrast between the two is difficult. Okay? But anyway, so we want to know what constitutes the image. So I'll talk a little bit about the image, and I'm going to hold most of it to the end. The fascinating thing they found about the image was that the image is what we call a surface phenomenon, meaning that the image fibrils on the shroud are limited to the very top 5 drills of the fibers. So if you took fibers and twisted them, you know, only the very top fibers will touch, right? And it's all of the image fibrils are monochromatic, means they're all the same color, exactly. They're about 30% darker than the shroud, than the limit. And the interesting thing was that if you've ever looked at a newspaper, I do this with high school students. Take a newspaper, take a magnifying glass, and look at the picture, a black and white newspaper. And what do you see? You see hundreds of little pixels. Okay, it's not like a paint smear, it's little pixels. And the closer those pixels are together, the darker the image. Okay, the more you spread it out, the lighter the image. And that's what they were seeing, is that these pixelated images might be 2 or 3 in a row, and there'll be nothing, then it'll be massive, and that's just made the dark and light of the shroud. So it became more and more curious to them about what could have done this. So let's go one more slide. Okay? So here's an example. It was the top 5 drills of the fibers. So they knew more about what didn't create the image than they knew about what did. Right? Well, we'll talk about it again. But for example, they knew that there was no substance. There was no paint, no ink, no dye, no chalk, no acid, something what we call oxidized cloth. And it was scorch light, but it wasn't a scorching heat. You know, sometimes artists can do a bother people. They'll take a very hot statue and press it into the linen and burn it. Okay? That's heat. But we knew that the image was not created by heat because it doesn't what we call fluoresce. And we'll talk about that later. There was no vapor. It was not. There was people said, well, maybe it was the sweat from the body and the vapor of the ammonia or whatever left images. But the problem with that, as they ruled out very quickly, was that vapors diffuse and they penetrate. And there was no diffusion and no penetration. Something purposefully hit these fibrils and not those next to it. And these fibrils, okay? I know it's very confusing, but it'll make more sense if we go on. And there's no outline. Even artists who look at it say they find no outline, no brush strokes, no directionality of the brush stroke, no signs of an artist. So we're going to hold the image till the end. Now we'll talk about the blood studies. You know, today, in forensic science, we can tell a lot from a drop of blood. Okay? So among the main ones, we can tell you certainly that it's not paint. You know, that it's blood, not paint. We can tell you that whether it's human or animal. We can tell you whether it's male or female, whether it's modern or in some cases ancient, and what type of blood it was, AB or AB. And it can show evidence of trauma. okay, for someone who died in trauma. So we're going to look at these things as blood chemists and hematologists found when they first viewed the shroud and completely ruled out any artistic blood. Okay? It was real blood. So let's just go look. Dr. John Keller with the New England Institute of Medicine, and Dr. Alan Adler, the late Dr. Alan Adler, was with Western Connecticut University. He was a blood chemist. And they were allowed to examine and take specks of the blood and examine them in the laboratory. And the first thing they noted, this was them, clearly this is human blood. It has what we call hemoglobin, warfarin, bilirubin, which is like a red bile, albumin, and proteins. And I said, this is human blood. There is no pink in these samples. Okay? They also found that an interesting thing was that the blood was on the cloth before the image. And that's a fascinating discovery. And they knew that because when they removed flecks of blood, there was no image underneath it, even though it was on either side. So that told them that this was an odd way for an artist to work. Who would take this long 14-foot blood, just put blood in the perfectly correct anatomical positions, and then do an image around it. Any artist who really studied the shroud will tell you there's no way that was done. So that raises another question. Well, why was the blood on the shroud before the image unless it was actually happening? And secondly, they noted that the blood soaked through the cloth. Whereas the image was a surface phenomenon, touching just the top eyeball, the blood in some places, namely the back of the head, the hands, and the sideboard, soaked through the cloth so that we could see it from the back side. Okay? So these were some of the things that they were finding, but they certainly ruled out any kind of painting at this point. Okay. Then, in the mid-90s, a Dr. Richard Tryon, who was with the DNA lab at the University of Texas, was given a sampling of blood from the back of the head, what we call the occipital area. And Dr. Tryon was astounded when he found that he could identify in the blood sample what we call amelogen X, amelogen Y, which is a male chromosome, X and Y chromosome. So he could say, this is a male in the blood. And, I had the opportunity to talk about Tryon one time, and I said to him, can you say that this is the blood of Jesus? And he said, I will have to answer you as a scientist. But I can't say this is the blood of Jesus. I can tell you that it's consistent with anything I would expect to find if it were the blood of Jesus. And then he went on to elaborate. He said it's a highly degraded DNA, consistent with the supposition of ancient blood. Okay? Because, as the blood gets older and older, it starts to deteriorate, it starts to separate, the DNA strands have to be reconstructed. They then found that the blood on the shroud was typed as a type AB. And that was very significant. Two different laboratories did that. Because in the world population, there are 4 blood types. There's A, B, O, and AB. And the rarest form of blood on Earth is AB blood. So maybe 5% of the world population has AB blood. And it is called in the medical community a biotype of the Middle East. So now there's just another consistent piece of information. Okay? You can see most people have type O, which is the green, type B, which is the purple, type A, which is the yellow. So now it's just started to come together. Love. burial shrouds, most of the time it's black. It's just black. Occasionally you see one that's red. And they pointed out that, Dr. Adler and Dr. Heller pointed out that there were high levels of bile pigment bilirubin in the blood. And that makes the blood redder. And that's caused by people who are under great trauma and stress. Okay? It's just a fascinating discovery. I talked to Dr. Adler one time in Turin, and I asked him if he could explain to me in lay language, since I'm not a medical doctor, what's the significance of finding high levels of bilirubin on the shroud? And he said that when a person is losing a lot of his blood, as obviously Jesus was, the body, as a defense mechanism, releases bilirubin into the system from the liver. And its purpose is to cling to red blood cells and help the remaining blood cells carry more blood, kind of supplement it. So the point is that this was very solid information about what happened to this man, right? We have to have some water while we're done. Okay. Then a very interesting discovery was made, which kind of more and more ruled out any kind of medieval, any kind of Renaissance, any other point of history, but the point that we're talking about with Jesus. They subjected the shroud to ultraviolet light. And when you put ultraviolet light on the shroud, you see things that you don't see with the naked eye. Okay? One of those things is that, first is a little medical thing. When blood clots, this is from my medical friend, when blood clots are healing, they congeal, they shrink. And when they shrink, they leave a telltale ring around the exterior that really winds up being serum from the blood and proteins, albumin proteins. So the point is this: when they subjected it to ultraviolet light, we could see around the bloodstains these white little, called serum halos around these clot retractions. Now, as any doctor will tell you that has studied the shroud, this is an unfakeable thing. No medieval artist or Renaissance artist, nobody up to the present time even knew about clot retraction rings, never mind to duplicate them, for people who couldn't understand them anyway, couldn't even see them. Okay, so we'll follow one thing. Let me explain this first of all. This is the kind of stomach area. That's the side movement. Okay, this is the side movement. That's the patch, disregard that. But you notice around the both end, there's this white halo. See that? That's the serum albumin halo. So, everybody who really studied the cloth was convinced, and more and more the arguments were falling away. Back in the 80s when I first started studying it, it was terrible. People had the most weird theories. But as they really studied it and subjected it to these laboratory tests, you began to see a pattern that was really kind of hard to deny. Okay? So, quick summary. They determined this is a real human blood of a male with a type of biotype of the Middle East, with a highly degraded DNA consistent with ancient blood, with bilirubin from the Middle East indicating stress and trauma, and clot retraction rings which were unfakeable. All right? There's more, but this just gives you a very good picture of the blood studies. Okay? So then a fascinating discovery was made on the shroud in 1982. It was made by accident by a German physicist who was looking at the Henri photos that I told you earlier. And he thought he saw, well, let me tell you the conclusion, then I'll say how it happened. The conclusion that was reached was that the the man of the shroud was entombed with bunches and bouquets of flowers. Something that we really didn't know in modern times, but was known better in the early church. And how did they figure that out? So, this professor noticed what he thought was a image of a flower. I know it's pretty hard to see. The image of a flower to the left side of the head, about 15 centimeters away. And he didn't know exactly what he was looking at, so he brought in Dr. Albert Weiner, and the two of them went to Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And Professor Avinon Nadim, who was a botanist at Hebrew University, who was kind enough, by the way, to give me these pictures, which I'm about to show you, said that he could tell them that this was a particular kind of flower, which he called the chrysanthemum coronata. He said this was a type of flower which was available in Jerusalem, in the markets, in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. Now, if that had come from Catholic University or Fordham or Notre Dame, people might not pay as much attention. But coming from Hebrew University, that was a big, big discovery. And he said, I can tell you that there's other flowers that I see. Right? He said they found pollen from this plant called Dahlia tuberforti, which is the thorn thistle bush. And most of the pollen is around the shoulder area. And you can see these thorns are like 3 inches long. And Professor Nadim did a tour, a botanical tour around the world. And he always would say that the images on the shroud, floral images on the shroud, represent geographic and calendar indicators of the province of the shroud coming from the area of Jerusalem. That's a pretty astounding statement. What he meant, by the way, by calendar was that these were flowers that were known to bloom in March and April of the year, consistent with the time of the Passion. Okay? Right. They found another beautiful flower called a box rose, which was to the side of the right face, right side of the face. And then we found a fourth flower called the Zygophilum, the bean caper plant. And the point is that all of these flowers were prevalent at the time of Jesus. So, you know, I teased Professor Nadim one time and I said, so you could say that this was the Catholic forms. He said, Mr. John, I'm a Hebrew professor at Hebrew University. I'll tell you what I see, but I'm not going to interpret it as the Catholic forms. Anyway, just having some fun. But anyway, so a question comes up. Sometimes I get this in my lecture, but people would ask me, well, how do you know this is the historic Jesus and not somebody else that was crucified at that time? Okay? And we're going to look at this now as Catholics have viewed the shroud. Okay? To explain how to explain how we come to the conclusion that is the historic Jesus. So, many forensic pathologists have studied the shroud, and they would say there is a signature here, a Roman crucifixion, as it applies to the historic Jesus. It's a match of words of the New Testament, weapons that we use, and the wounds that were created. So let's look at how we come to the conclusion that it is the historic Jesus and not somebody else. Well, one of the first things we'll analyze is that when you look at the shroud, the left hand is over the right hand. This is a backward image. This is a reverse image. And you see a blood stain at the wrist area. So, going back to the 1960s, a French surgeon by the name of Pierre Barbet wrote a book called A Doctor of Calvary. There was a surgeon's look at the wounds on the shroud. And he made a very interesting observation. He said, the man on the shroud was not nailed through the wrists. He was nailed, he said at first, through the wrist exiting in the area of the ulnar bone, a little bone in the back of the wrist. So that kind of didn't go far at that point. But then along came Dr. Robert Buckland and Zimmerman, the two main pathologists on the shroud. And Buckland said that when he first saw the shroud, he said he noticed a very interesting thing. If you look at the hand, he said, I did not see the left thumb. In other words, if you put your hand like that, you see a thumb. The thumb was missing. The thumb was hidden, I should say. Okay? So he said, that told me that what Barbet was saying had a lot of merit, because if he was nailed in the wrist, there's a median nerve here, and if you affect that median nerve, the thumb is drawn into the palm. So that was a very interesting discovery. And then along came Dr. Zubide, probably the main pathologist on the shroud, and he said, yes, he said, he believes the entrance wound was in the high palm exiting in the wrist. So that was a very different portrait. You know, it was a very, I guess you'd say, consistent with anatomy. And you just go on. Oh, never mind, say it. And he said, you know, it was not in the mindset of the medieval or Renaissance artist to paint Jesus nails through the wrists. Jesus was always painted through the palms. Okay? And my wife, who was, a student of art over the years, we went back one day and we went through all the medieval paintings, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, Da Vinci, all of them. And we could not find any medieval or Renaissance painting showing Jesus nailed through the wrist. It was always nailed through the palms. So it wasn't in their mindset to do it this way. Okay? Now, we know that Jesus was, and this is really serious, we know that from the New Testament. And an examination of the shroud by these pathologists said to them, they can tell you that he was whipped by two men, one on either side. They can even tell you they were of different heights because of the angles of the whip marks. And that his arms were over his head in front of him because the last mark he came around and hit him in the chest, as we'll see a little bit later. Okay? So the interesting about that is that the weapon that the Romans used was called a flagrum. And a flagrum consisted of a wooden or leather handle with 3 leather thongs, and at the end of them were 2 pieces of bone or lead. And so if you hit somebody with a flagrum, you leave 6 contusions or abrasions. Okay? So when we look at the photos, these photos taken by Barry, of course, who's the main Shroud photographer. I'm going to meet Barry next month in Canada. We're doing a lecture here. And Barry is Jewish. And he said to me one time that he said, when I went over with the original Spirit team in him, he said, I expected that I look at the shroud, in 2 days they would figure out there was a fake, and I would be home. He said, but what happened in those 5 days changed his life. And now he lectures all over the world. Anyway, it was just an interesting personal story. But he's just a quick. But on the back of the shroud, you see the double marks in different directions from the flagrum, from the Roman whip. And here's another painting swelling all over the back. He was at the exterior, from the back of the neck, all the way down to the lower ribs, which you can see. You know, I would invite you again, I know these are probably hard to see, but feel free to come up, look at them, you'll see some of the detail I'm talking about. Just don't touch the photo, but feel free to take pictures with yourself. But anyway, my point is that this was very consistent with Roman flavor. And this mark I can see right here is commonly called the blood belt. What it meant was when the body was laid horizontally, the wound on the side emanated blood and water, blood and serum. And it fell to the back of the shroud. And the shroud is made of linen, but it's not a soft linen like you think of as a sheet. It's actually starch. And the starch makes the blood and serum roll in the starch. So that's kind of what you're seeing. Okay? Okay. Now, one of the real signatures of the identification of the man comes in the cap of thorns. Right? And the reason I say that is that in the Gospels, it says they stripped him with a scarlet robe on him, twisted together a crown of thorns, and set it on his head. They put a staff on his right hand, and out in front of him, and mocked him as the king of the Jews. Right? So when Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was brought before the Jewish high court, the Sanhedrin. And it was illegal to try a man at night. They wanted to railroad him through a trial because of the people. So what happens was they condemned him of blasphemy. They said, this man said, if you destroy this temple, I will raise it in 3 days. Of course, he's talking about his body. They have no idea what he's talking about. I think he's talking about the temple. But the problem was that they couldn't execute him without agreeing to the Romans, and the Romans could care less about blasphemy. They didn't care what the Jewish religion was. Okay? But if you committed treason, then a Roman court could condemn you. So they changed the charge. And they said, wait a minute, this man said he was a king. And so that's when the soldiers take him out, cap him with thorns, mocking his kingship, put a scarlet robe on him, gave him a staff. And anyway, so, go ahead, someone. So, here's the interesting thing, that crucifixion was much more common in the Roman Empire, but if you look at all of the historians of the period, Tacitus, Romans, Tacitus, Suetonius, and Pliny, and the Jewish historians, Josephus and Philo, they will talk about many crucifixions. Sometimes massive crucifixions, sometimes men and women. And there is no example that we find in any literature of anybody capped with thorns, except for the story of Jesus in heaven. That is a signature. Okay? Now, we know that Jesus was lamb from the side. He's a patch mark, he's a burn mark. So we know that he was lamb from the side. And this is another identifier because in the Gospel of John, it says that when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his leg. It said one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. And so this was not the way the Romans normally did it. If they had to take somebody down from the cross, they would break their legs. You know, but when they came to Jesus and saw he was dead, they lanced him in the side. You see what I'm saying? These are signatures of who we're talking about. Okay? And this is his face. A couple of things I want to point out. You see this three on the forehead. That's a blood flow. It's backwards on the shroud. They call it the epsilon line. It's a blood flow over the furrows of the brow, blood flow. They can tell you that over the left eyebrow is a swelling. See it up here. Over the right cheek, there's a swelling from when he was slapped and punched. Okay, and the nose, the cartilage of the nose is separated. The nose isn't broken, but there's a separation of the cartilage, which could be from a fall, could be from a punch. We don't know. Anyway, I want to say just one interesting story. I had a chance one time in Canada to talk to children. They were like 10, 11 years old. And when I first went to Canada, and they told me I was going to talk to these 10-year-olds, I thought, good grief, how do I do this? So, anyway, I toned it down a little bit. But I asked the teachers if they would ask the students, there were about 100 of them, to write one sentence about what they took away from this, I guess. And they did that. And I went back to my room that night in Vancouver, and I have to tell you, I don't know what to expect, from 110-year-olds. I didn't know what to expect. But I sat there reading these. I actually had tears in my eyes by the time I was finished. Because they would say things like, one little boy said, before you talk, I was losing my faith in Jesus. Now I'm starting to believe. So let's take a look, okay? One little girl said, when I saw the face, talking about this, I realized for the first time that Jesus had suffered. And this is from 10-year-olds. So anyway, it's just fascinating the reaction that it had. This is just a quick summary. Pathologist anatomist Dr. Zubey always used to say that anatomy on the shroud supports authenticity. Everything we see, the blood marks, the serum halos, the lash marks, the flow of gravity down the arms, blood flow through the broken elbow, and everything he saw said this was authentic. Okay. So a quick summary. So we have no record of anyone with this combination of images. Skirt, like nail in the hands, wrists, and feet, crown with thorns, lance in the side, face severely bruised, postmortem halo, consistent with the timing of the scourging in the morning and the afternoon, and on a cloth always historically associated with Jesus. So I reached the conclusion, you have to make up your own mind, that at this point, there is nobody else that they're talking about here but the historic Jesus. Okay? So, before we get to what created the image, I wanted to tell you the results of the carbon-14 test, because most people think that the carbon-14 test of 1988 disproved the shroud, made it review. Okay? But what you don't see, you see these things on page 1. And then when they realize the mistake that they made, it's on page 35 with some more, maybe. You just don't know. So a lot of people don't know, but this is what actually happened. If you look at the lower half of the shroud, where they took the test, you see this patch over here? This is actually a patch, 3.5 inches by 5.5 inches, which was put on the lower left corner of the shroud after one of the king's daughters, one of the boy, cut a piece of the corner as a souvenir, which was never found. Okay? So what they did, I'll tell you what they did to set you up with what the discovery was. They took a patch of cotton. They dyed it with a yellow matter dye, and they wove it into the shroud. Okay, so the cotton fibers were woven into the linen fibers. They didn't sew it, right? So that's kind of the setup. So when they did the carbon-14 test, there was a serious violation of the protocol. And the protocol set up for 3 years was, among other things, that the samples would be taken from various points on the shroud. All the chemists said, you won't get a true reading unless you have samples from different areas of average. carbon labs who dated them 1260 to 1390, even though everything else contradicted. Okay? But a couple years, well, 14 years actually, before a woman by the name of Susan Benker made a brilliant discovery. And unfortunately, she died right after she made this. And I had a chance to speak with her, not even realizing she was sick and terminal. But she said to me, I asked her if she could explain how she figured this out. And she said that when she was looking at photographs of the samples were like postage size samples. Okay? So when I saw the samples, I realized that there were two different kinds of fibers in the sample. She sent them to different chemists, and they said, oh yeah, this is a cotton fiber and a linen fiber. And the combination of Renaissance cotton with ancient linen gave them the date of 1260, 1390. So now most of the carbon scientists acknowledge that, yeah, there was a mistake. They didn't make it, they were just given a bad sample. Okay? So that whole question is now wide open. Okay? But as far as anyone was concerned, the carbon test was refuted at that point. Not as being a bad test, but as having a bad sample. All right? And just to give you an example, I mentioned earlier five mosaic photos, maybe 4 different colors. Look at the photo left corner of the shroud. It's a totally different from the rest of the shroud. And this is where they took these. Right? So anyway, just wanted to show you that. Okay? A couple more things before we talk about the image. On the shroud, if you look at this picture right here, you see these 4 burn holes, these 4 holes on each side. About the hips, there's 4 holes. And we always thought that the holes were made by the fire of 1532, right? But we found a painting in the year 1516 that showed these holes. So now we know it's not really a big fire, 16 years